because it is definitely got horror and elements. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm a scaredy cat. I don't do well with horror. Katie has made me watch so many scary movies. Some of them I have really enjoyed, and some of them I was mad that I had to sit through. That one with the under Paris.
As above, so below.
I'm so angry I watched that movie. I randomly think about it.
She can't go to Paris now. Thanks, Katie.
Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. It's me at night with my handsome bitch co-hosts, Katie and William.
Hey guys, welcome back. This is the second part of our Southern Reach trilogy read. We had originally wanted to do them in one single video, and we went for 2.5 hours and only got about halfway through the second book. So despite the fact that sequels do terrible on our channel and sci-fi does terrible on our channel, we thought, hey, let's make it. You know what? This is a niche podcast where we talk about academic things. Katie now looks like she is an at-home therapist / crystal mommy. Maria forgot to wear her glasses, so she doesn't have a PhD today. And here we go. Professor Maria, say some professor stuff.
It's in the syllabus. Did you read the syllabus?
Yeah, so this is us doing the second half of the Southern Reach trilogy because we just had so much to talk to from the first half. It's, there's a lot going on. There are themes. Good. There's stuff you can really sink into. There was almost pistols.
I would definitely say it's a disagreement, but more like a nuanced, see it from multiple sides. And
it's not a murder bot situation where there's one side that's very clearly right and
then
two
that would
that
be
are very
incorrect.
clearly wrong.
No, that would
see
be
what I'm
absolutely.
saying? We're kind of past those as a channel.
No.
Listen, if you want to get into the murder bot discussion right now, I will pistolas for days.
That's what I'm saying. Our channel is pretty much past it, unfortunately. And so, yeah, we're doing the second half of the Southern Reach. Very quickly before we start just diving in, what is the premise of the Southern Reach? Though really, you're going to want to have watched the first video on this beforehand.
Yes, please. Do yourself the favor. Either have read the books already and just for some reason have decided you only want the second half of Authority and then want Acceptance, or go watch the other one. But the Southern Reach trilogy is basically an examination of... there's an area of the United States...
In Florida.
In Florida. Headcanon that people can't go into anymore. It has been, there is an unnatural force field border around it with only one doorway that you can go into, and there is this organization called the Southern Reach that sends expeditions in to figure out what's happening in there. Why did it happen? Is this aliens? Is it future Earth attacking past Earth?
Multiverse.
Is it multiverse? What is this and why is it happening? The first book is an exploration of a woman going into it's called Area X as a biologist in an expedition, and it is really you from her point of view, her journal, and her experience.
Important to note, it's because it's a pretty fun structural thing, as it's in first person versus this next one, which is in
third person.
Ironically, it's not in, the second book isn't in second person.
It's in third person, and it is same universe, same thing, similar time, it technically picks up right after the first book ends, but you're in a completely different situation, which is you were in the headquarters of the Southern Reach with the new director coming in to take over for the last director, who decided to go in on the expedition as a psychologist with the biologist from the first book, and who is coming in to try fix the vagaries of the current Southern Reach processes, and also try to figure out what the heck is happening, because he has been given not enough information for the situation he's in, and slow building tension, paperwork, sorting through notes, meeting different...
Dead mouse and a plant in a drawer.
a cell phone that keeps showing
up. That won't go away.
It keeps showing up in people's bags. It's... and building up to a sense of dread and tension. And we kind of got about halfway through that book. We would have gotten farther, but we got derailed. I wouldn't say derailed. We happily explored William's issues with the book because Katie and I both had a very similar reading experience.
I think you mean the inherent flaws in its structure, but go ahead.
No. Depending on what kind of reader you are, you will think that there is an inherent.
We ended up talking a little bit more about this after we stopped recording last time for whatever reason, and basically what it came down to is that the series is very meandering, and if you're not going in expecting it to be meandering, you're like, why is this meandering? And I think that the series could have done more to signal that it was going to be meandering instead of like not like. So one of the examples I used is Hyperion. Hyperion is a book that is we talked about for 6 episodes, but that very much fills in the world as the story moves forward. There's very little forward plot movement, but you expect that going in because the concept of that book is how did you always like to say it, Maria?
Cantic fairy tales and space.
And so like you go in expecting like, oh, this is going to be 6 stories about the past. So there's a very clear like expectation of what's going to be like. Whereas in this series, I think you go in with the reasonable expectation that the plot will move forward, and it doesn't really as much as it could.
So 2 of the 3 of us did not have that expectation. Katie and I did not. So Will did, and that is absolutely valid, and I can see why he would. But Katie and I just went in and like the first book ended and we both went, oh, what a lovely condensed, like, oh, what a beautiful packaged story. Huzzah, that story is done. The biologist story is over. Good job. And then we started the second one and we were like, ooh, what juicy tidbits lie here. And slow, creepy creeps. And fair. And also, Will mentioned this, I have a really high tolerance and I would say love for the slow, mundane, everyday. And Will doesn't at the best of times, so I can absolutely imagine coming off of this first book with the interpretation he had, which was, okay, what's happening next? And then being like, what the fuck? With the second book, because there's like, if you're like, what's happening next? It's gonna take a minute to find out, buddy.
Will, you said that you kind of wished it had signaled it, but for me, the signal was the way the first book was written.
But like, what other book or movie have you guys read the first one of and then expected that the second one would be about the past for half of it?
Yeah, that happens a lot.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. The Graceling trilogy. The first book happens, and then the second one just goes back in the past, and then the third one is the continuation of the first one. The thing is, I've seen books like that, and again, I don't mind. And I did not finish the biologist story going, what's going to happen to the biologist? I went,
no, I thought she was dead.
Bitch is going to turn into a weird thing. She's going to be a dolphin with a human eye. And that was it.
But wouldn't you like to see that? Wouldn't that be the next step of the story?
No.
What are you guys talking about?
It's the unknown. It's the not knowing.
It's supposed to be
why
horror.
would you want to look at the monster?
Here's the thing. I understand the first book ending as the end of the story. I actually really do. I understand, oh shit, it's done. Like, oh, that was it. That was a nice cap. The one way I described it is the philosopher's story in Hyperion. How at the end of that, you feel like the drum beats of like, okay, once more onto the breach, like the Bonnie and Clyde ending or whatever. Like, it's an ending to the story, even as it's about what's going to happen. Like, the character has made a decision to face this challenge. But if that was the last moment of his story we got, I think it's a self-completed story. But then if we had another book about his grandfather, I would have been like, really? Like, why are we talking about that? That's not as interesting.
Again, I think it is just 2 different interactions.
Look, I'm sorry. I don't think it's fundamentally exceptional for me to read a book and go, the next book will move the plot forward.
No, I that's why I said I understand why you came for that. But again, I didn't. That wasn't what I was here for.
I was expecting like Hills, like again, like books or short stories that are kind of experimental, like Hills Like White Elephant.
I understand now. You're saying that if you had watched Star Wars: A New Hope and the next book had been an Attack of the Clones, you would have been like, "This is awesome. We're getting a
That's not even remotely the same comparison.
That is a blockbuster movie. How can you even compare the 2?
I'm kidding, because obviously there's genre expectations going in, but the first Star Wars movie ends on a pretty like decisive note in a lot of ways. There's not a lot left to explore next in terms of plot lines that haven't been followed up. So then for the next movie to then have been taking place in the past, it would have been kind of, and like, hey, we now have a story about the administrator of the Death Star building it before it got blown up.
But there is something experimental in the book. It's not a standard story. It is not
So
the
that's what
way
notes it.
she meanders. She starts telling us about her past halfway through the book. Not in like nothing about this series is chronological. We don't get her we get a lot of stuff out of order from
we get
the
a lot of
first book.
flashbacks in the
And
first
so
book.
That's very common for books, though.
But so I would argue is exploring the past through another perspective in
the
sequel.
second
And
book?
it's also not the past. It is the
it's not the past. Yes.
It happens exactly after. The biologist
That's
does
a
the
good
thing,
point.
and it picks up because when the biologist commits, that when she goes into the tunnel and the crawler does the thing, that's when her doppelganger is created. It's the exact same.
You know what's funny? I actually think that if it was a prequel, it would have bothered me less than it being a sequel that takes place. No, because we're talking about framing. If it's a prequel, then I know this is the story of what happened before. Whereas this one starts with, oh, she's back. The last thing she said in the first book was, I'm going to stay here. And now she's back. And so the plot is moving forward of what the island wants. And we know, is it real her? Is it fake her? We have interactions with.
I at no point was I like, it's real her. I was like, real her is a dolphin.
Well, I knew.
Yeah, like I was like, how is the world going to react to this? How is the world
exactly
going to react?
And how does the world react?
Well, they send in control.
He spends like half the book doing paperwork.
I love it.
It's
Listen,
not
I get that you don't like it, but I love it.
All I'm saying is that I think the weirder reaction to the first book is to go, oh yeah, that plot's not going to move forward in the sequel, than to say the plot is going to move forward in the sequel. I'm saying like 60-40, my reaction was more reasonable, is basically all I'm arguing. And I don't think you guys need to agree with it, but I think that's what I'm arguing, is that my reaction is like 60% more normal to your guys is like 40 to 30.
Listen, I knew Will was going to hate the second, or not hate, but I knew Will was going to dislike the second book 3 weeks before we read it. You know, like I just, in my heart of hearts, over here.
What's funny is that my brain has actually, since we discussed this like 3 days ago, I now like the second book more because partly I'm processing it in my brain as, oh, this is the first thing you read. Like, remember how we said if I had read that first, I would have liked it more. So I'm kind of trying to reprocess it as I remember reading it as the information the first time. And I would have been like, ooh, this is a creeping horror. Like, oh, what is going on? We'll have to revisit this because in the third book, it's going to get this argument is going to continue. But the funny thing is, I wasn't going to retouch on this too much because we discussed pretty much all of the second book up until the point where new stuff does start to happen. Yes. The only thing I don't think we covered was the whole voice control plot line.
And basically what that is please watch the first video. I don't want to recap.
We're sorry, guys. It took us 2.5 hours to get to this point.
Just watch it and then watch this one. I don't know what to tell you. But while Control/John is at the Southern Reach doing his stuff, he has a handler, and his handler is the Voice. And the Voice just calls him on a special cell phone that he has. He doesn't know if it's a man or a woman. It has a really distorted voice. He calls it the Megalodon, and he imagines just a giant megalodon, but in a fishbowl, like just in a water tank, talking through to him. And the Voice regularly is questioning him, wants briefing, wants to see, and keeps saying, is your house in order? And stuff like that. And the Voice is caustic and antagonistic.
I honestly just picture Quentin Tarantino.
I originally didn't like the Voice because I was like, this doesn't feel professional. Like, this feels like Lindsay Ellis writing a government official versus Michael Crichton. But once I realized like that was a specific thing the author was doing, and also the way that the Voice got built up as a character, I really liked it because you get it's such a overbearing presence on Control that's like really mean and creepy.
And there are moments where stuff happens and then like the Voice would say something and then Control would react away, and you're kind of like, that's weird. Get back down to quick, Control. What happened? And what you find out and what he finds out, because Grace keeps being like, Grace, the assistant director, keeps being like, stay out of my office, shithead. And he was like, I wasn't in your office. And then what you realize is that the voice has been using hypnosis on him, and he ends up discovering this by recording conversations he has with the voice so that he can watch it back later, and he sees the moments where the voice uses hypnotic commands on him, and he like blacks out, and he realizes he's missing, because he's kind of known he's been missing chunks of the day, like he was having some severe time blindness, and he realizes, oh shit, he probably did go through Grace's office. Like, what did the voice make him do? So he creates a plan to kind of break out the voice's control and to fuck up the voice, which works. And his mom calls him and is like, "Are you pleased with yourself?" Because again, Jackie Severance is a like bigwig in the spy central community, and eventually her and him kind of have a Mexican standoff. No, is it a Mexican standoff? And they have a phone call where he's like, "You have been lying to me. He's been using mind control. What is happening?" And she basically says to him, "I can't tell you a lot. You need to trust me. I'm not doing anything purposefully to harm you." And he says, "Okay, tell me who the voice is." And it is Lowry, a character we, prior to this point, have not mentioned, but in the book is mentioned several times. And Lowry is I actually think we did mention him.
Yeah, we did. We talked about him at length, actually.
Oh, yeah, because we talked about him and Cynthia/Gloria. But anyway.
Yes.
Lowry is the only person that survived the very first expedition into Area X, and had super traumatic. We talked about the scene where John watches the videos of that first expedition, and Lowry is one of the people in them, and he has a huge fear and but also like antagonism towards Area X, and he's the one who pioneers the hypnosis stuff and like preps expeditions a lot of the time. And that's who the voice was. And you learn in book 3, and I'm just going to mention this now because it makes sense too, and we might not mention it, that the director, like the previous director, who was the psychologist, who is Gloria, was under his jurisdiction, thumb. He hid a piece of her past that we'll get to, and to pay him back, or he was blackmailing her constantly, she had to support him, do the things he asked, and do favors for him. And so Lowry is just this scared man, just terrified but angry. And
imagine if the comedian of the horror movie that you watch, who's the comedic relief, actually lived but had severe PTSD and got really old and cranky.
That's actually a perfect.
Well, that's the way it was painted in the. Did we talk about the video?
We talked about how well written and creepy it was. We didn't talk about what happened.
And the background moved, and he realized it wasn't the background; it was a thing. I still see that in my head, and it's so creepy. I see it like a Junji Ito anime for some reason.
You know what? It really sticks with me. It's not that one, funnily enough, even though that's a really good part. It's the part where whoever's holding the camera instead of Lowry is videotaping Lowry, and he's sitting down and he's speaking backwards or whatever on the thing. But the person who's recording isn't speaking backwards or whatever, and it's like you can
understanding.
Okay, the only one I didn't find creepy was when the camera's floating high above, and that's the one they keep referencing afterwards as being creepy, and I'm like, that's not that creepy, guys. It's called the drone.
It's not that creepy. I was just like, wait, what's supposed to be scary about that?
There's a lot of good. I think the reason it's creepy is the implication is what is holding the camera.
No, I agree. It just, for me, like,
it's the least creepiest.
It's the least. Like, the other two are like such striking images, and this one is like, and then it was and I just imagine it like flying over. Like, for some reason that didn't work for me.
And the other thing that is so great is they never actually describe in those scenes. We're getting derailed. The actual. I mean,
we gave ourselves a whole nother video to be derailed.
They never actually describe the worst thing. Like, he watches the worst thing off screen. We never find out what the worst, terriblest
I want to know what it was.
Oh, God. It makes it so terrible because you're like, was it the giant background creature coming and, like, gnawing on people's bones? But, like, what is it? And, like, why didn't Vandermeer write it? How creepy was it for him?
I want to know what it was. It really kills me that we're not told what it is.
I know, but that's why he did it. Because we're hooked.
Yeah, it's unseen versus seen.
You're a little fish on a hook.
I know, but I want to know what it is.
Did we talk last time about the fallout from them?
Yes, you spoke about it. you
Okay, no, because
specifically, and how that's what made it creepier for you was his reaction and how long it stayed with him.
Yeah, it's almost like a really bad hangover that's like disrupting reality, like kind of dragging it like cheesecloth almost, and it's like ripping, and then to have the fight with Grace afterwards, I don't think we talked about that, was like such a good moment to be like,
and it's being juxtaposed that in that scene with him and the memory of his grandfather asking him to come in the car and finding the gun, and you keep getting the refrain of check the seats for change,
check the seats, John. Yeah,
check the seats for
so
change,
great.
John.
Because you really do think,
so,
going back to voice, at one point he thinks like, oh, maybe they took my grandfather out of retirement, because this sounds like him. There's kind of that melding of the two worlds, and basically after he talks to his mother, and his mother is like, you got to do this, we had to send you in, and he's like, you told me you sent me here to fix the place I was, that's not what's happening, you were dropping me into Berlin and I was on a mission and you didn't tell me that, and it's a break of trust. And then after this point he has the big coming to Jesus moment with Grace, who we described Grace a little, but I love the way the male voice actor does her voice.
I know.
Which is like, she's just this cranky black lady who's middle management, who's both like very cranky but very efficient at the same time, and does not like him coming in.
She gives me massive oh shoot, I'm forgetting her name now. The character from
Suicide Squad?
Yeah, the chick that's the head of the suicides, the police off she becomes the commissioner. Whatever her name is, that is exactly like from the cartoon, actually, is what I pictured. Literally verbatim that. And she's got that little southern drawl.
He does it so well. And so and this whole time they've kind of been sparring back and forth. And he has had Control look at her records higher up or whatever. Though I don't know how much he did that versus it's a thing voice told him to do, but whatever. And at this point, it was interesting because when she had him go in to see the videos, one of the things that makes it so creepy is that she was actually really nice to him. She knew how hard this was going to be on him.
Put a hand on his shoulder as he walked out. She held him up after the videos, like she literally helped him up and getting to the door.
And then she does the bitchiest move possible, which afterwards, and he almost can't function because of trying to, all of his reality slipping away. She decides to, in the middle of the cafeteria, take him down a peg or two by telling everybody his tragic backstory.
Which is really just like, it's like, yeah, that happens sometimes.
Yeah, I did not like her. It was such a low pot shot.
I thought it was a really good moment also, though, for Control. It's because it showed his level of, like, he's not over it, but he is, and how much he's been bullied for it. And so it's almost like this, like, he has this martyrdom that makes you empathize with him even more for some of the stuff he's going through, which was nice.
And basically what it is that on his first, not his first, but like 3 missions in, his third field mission, he gets sent to infiltrate a group of domestic terrorists. And he ends up kind of getting close to one of the terrorists' girlfriends and then sleeps with her. Nothing happens, but they end up realizing that they find out that he is in the government and spying on them. So then they think that that girlfriend is working with him. And so they kill her and they shoot her. And so now his cover is blown. They know, like, now the terrorist organization knows that they're being watched, and an innocent girl died.
They kept bringing up domestic terrorists a lot throughout the entire series. And I was like, did he secretly know that? Yeah, did he know what was going to happen during these election seasons? This was published
back in 2014, so even back then it was a moving. And so it's interesting because it really does say a lot about his character and who he is now and how he deals with it. And again, it's one of the ways that the books are very focused on character in a way I didn't think they would be, and that, like, he is a really well sketched character, and one that the author clearly likes, and that worked except for his bonding with Ghostbird. So when the biologist came, the version of her that came back that he's been interrogating this whole time, we're gonna call her Ghostbird because she's the clone of the biologist, even though originally it's like, ooh, is she not? Because Ghostbird is, the book does set up that tension.
I mean, John, yeah, but you as the reader know what's up.
We're gonna call her Ghostbird because that's what she calls herself later, which is it was a nickname of the biologist's husband for her. And so the book throughout like 4 or 5 scenes has them talking, and each time it's like, oh, they're bonding, but I kind of felt like that was a little bit more informed than them actually bonding.
See, I didn't take it as them bonding. I because especially because of her reaction to him, like especially in the last book, I take it as him thinking they're bonding, doing the classic male thing of like she does not give a shit about him as a human.
Yeah, because women are never clingy, am I right, boys? So I don't know. I felt like it was. I think in the second book it can go either way because you're just not in her head. But in the third book, at points like she is kind of nice to him, and so it felt like to me like.
But she always qualifies it. Like there's literally a point where she was like, she did it mainly so she wouldn't have to deal with his fallout, or she like held him because otherwise he was going to fall down. Like it always qualifies that what she's. And then there's one point where she's like, and at this point she was like halfway through. She's like, and at this point she kind of cared enough about him to be nice, but also she didn't want him to fall apart. And so it always qualifies that she is focused on her mission.
It felt really like that is one thing. I don't want to critique it per se or like be like, you could have done better or something.
Critique it.
That's the one thing or not the one thing, but now that you've brought it up, Will, like in the set, I didn't even pay attention to it in the third book. It's because you got her perspective. And so I was like, whatever. Well, no, that's not true. That's not true. The first third of the book, I was like, why is he so attached to her?
That is the part
I don't understand.
So yeah, that's probably a better way to have phrased it, is his interest in her or his feeling of bonding with her is what felt like an informed trait. In that, to me, it was just like, why are you thinking about her boobs? Like, this does not seem like a real thing. Even you were like, I don't know why I'm thinking this. And you're like...
There was that one scene where he's just like, he's looking at her like he's like, oh, but now he's thinking about her breasts. I was like, why are you?
Yes, I didn't like. It's one of my least favorite things because at no point am I like, oh, okay, this is why. Like, it's not like he's very businesslike with her for the first like 4 meetings, and then something happens and they bond and that kind of blooms from there. No, like he is weirdly into her from scene 1, and this is 100% one of the weakest parts of the book because again, her reaction to him. Super reasonable, completely separated. And what it does is it makes him a skosh pathetic.
Yeah, it really does. It does.
I would say he's actually very pathetic. I like him, but he's real pathetic.
If it wasn't for that thing, because like him being so like puppy love struck and like intrigued makes it like, because there's a normal level of pathetic that like all humans are, like all of us are at a certain
Cancel
level.
Her, guys. Cancel
me. Like, we all can be pathetic about certain things. And then with her, you're just like, cringe, bro.
They pushed it so hard, I thought for a minute that there was going to be a big reveal and that her clone husband wasn't dead and that it was her clone husband for some reason. It's because I was
thinking,
like...
Yeah, I kept thinking Control was something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought, oh, is that the name? And it's like, he's not really John Rodriguez. And like, but then they gave way too much detail into his past. And I was like, oh, they're not going with this. But he was so into her that I was like, this must be her husband. Like, this must be like a reincarnation of their relationship. No.
It just doesn't quite work.
It doesn't
like work. The book is so good that like it doesn't break the story, but you're like, this is just a little bit off.
For me, while I would read those scenes, I'd be like, get it together, John. You're fucking compromised. This is why you weren't allowed to work in the field anymore. Like, I felt for Jackie Severance in those moments. Like, there's just, I don't like it. And the thing is, I think it could have worked if it had been a light touch, but perhaps he wanted him to be pathetic, like perhaps Vandermeer's like, exactly, that's exactly what I wanted.
I don't even think it just doesn't make sense for his character even. Like it
doesn't make it makes him seem like he didn't grow from those experiences that he has so much PTSD from.
But like, even if he's pathetic, why is a woman who's in sweats all the time suddenly super intriguing to him from moment 1, and he feels destabilized when she's around? And
it's not even like he's isolated and can't see other women. Like, he has access to the outside world every night.
It would make so much more sense if she was like that, because she's getting no other social contact whatsoever.
If there had been like a different kind of buildup, same amount of words, maybe same number of scenes, unsure. But instead of it building the way it does, it building more like where it kind of did at the very, very beginning, where he was like she keeps having she can't match the social cues the way she's supposed to or something like that. And then he's like, oh, this is intriguing. And then maybe she says something really, really like, if anything, he should be creeped out by her.
I wanted him to be the obsessed detective and her to be that's what I wanted. I wanted their relationship to be no, I'm going to crack the nut. Like, I'm going to get her to talk. She's the only, like, especially within what he has, she's the only one that can potentially have first-hand accounts of what the heck I'm dealing with and what I'm doing. And, like, I need that information. And I would have liked for that to have been the basis of the obsession. And then at the end, him being like, well, she's right. I've got, like, instead of it being like, I shall follow her, being like, nah, I trust that she knows what she's doing. I'm gonna.
There's a certain amount that could have been drawn between them both actually being outsiders to this organization, even as he is theoretically at its head and she is a captive. More could have been done with that. It really, to me, felt like the author being like, these are the two main characters and I like them, so they will like each other. And I'm like, but do they?
And again,
I mean, I understand. Yes,
doesn't.
Ghostbird doesn't like him as much or whatever, but that's just what it felt like to me. Is like, okay, we got to get the Avengers together. Like the main characters have to have a plan together.
So him and Grace eventually, after he's had a really rough time. He has the whole fallout with Control, or with the Voice, his mom, and he basically goes into Grace and he's like, listen, truce flag, let's be friends. And she's like, okay. And they kind of divvy up the expectations of what needs to be done in the Southern Reach. And it basically works where she is going to be actually running things and he is just investigation mode, but kind of just like a paper pusher. And there's a beautiful moment where
he
he's
lost.
Yeah, he loses. And there's a beautiful moment where he's like, he'll just come and he'll read others people's notes for years. And eventually maybe he'll get married because he's just going to be here for years reading notes. And then eventually they'll have kids. And from Friday night to Monday morning, he will be a devoted, present father. And then eventually his knees will go out from all the jogging and he'll develop a paunch. And then he'll retire and they'll give him a really nice watch.
I did like that.
Yeah, it's a great, because it is very realistic. But the other thing that happens is, so they finally kind of come to terms, Grace and him, and truced. And then she's like, by the way, Central took the biologist on Friday, because this is happening on a Monday. So the previous Friday is when he watched the videos, when Grace did the no good, very bad, let me air your dirty laundry, and he was not having a great day. He had the weekend, he came in on Monday, him and Grace have this interaction, and he finds out that Friday night the biologist was taken, so she hasn't been there the whole and he can't talk to her anymore, and he's very upset about that. Around all of this is him interacting with Whippy in different situations. Now, at the very beginning, when he first met Whippy and he went to the science lab, Whippy said there's a specific, because they talk about something, and Whippy's like, that's it, Control had said something that kind of hit the nail on the head for what he was saying. And he was like, I should show you the room. But at this point, the Control doesn't really take Whippy seriously. And he's like, I don't want to go to a room with this weird guy. And so he pushes Whippy off, and Whippy doesn't take him to the room. And then at multiple points later, when he's interacting with Whippy, he's like, is this the room you wanted to show me? And Whippy's like, no. Why would you think this was the room I wanted to
I
show
know.
you?
That was really funny.
And then Whippy doesn't offer to show it to him. And one of the places he finds Whippy was in a janitor's closet, literally just in a janitor's closet, with a very agonized look on his face. And it really throws Control for a loop.
He literally describes him as there is a pale, bent creature, hugging itself. Also, as a side note, real quick, I just wanted to say this because I know I'm going to forget it. I think my favorite chapter, this is hard to say, but I think my favorite chapter out of all three books is the chapter where he goes on the trip with Whippy and C name or K name. What's his name? The other guy with the motorcycle jacket.
Oh, God. What
Cassidy.
is his name? No.
Something like that.
Cerberus.
Point is that they are going out, to
Cheney.
the zone. Yeah, Cheney. Anyway, when they're going out then, that is my favorite, when he's all of the scientists are so nervous and socially awkward and they keep just spilling a whole bunch of really classified information.
Yeah, that's when Cheney tells him, did you know the previous director went across the border?
Yeah.
And he's like, the fuck? The previous director went across the border? And they're like, yeah, a year ago. And he's like, Nobody told me this.
And they're like, yeah, we're not supposed to talk about it, but like it's so quiet, I have to fill the air with stuff.
Rumor. And he's like, what kind of rumor is this? But yeah, so he's had all these interactions with Whippy. Also, what has been following him a lot around the Southern Reach is this sweet, sickly honey smell. Sorry, there's a cat.
Also, a side note, also the bunny thing. The rabbits, where it's like the rabbits were so scared that they started fighting back.
God, it's so... They were like, not for me, guys. Not for me. Especially when you find out that they're probably in another dimension / on a different planet.
Yeah, that was weird. I love too when he's like, so they're breeding and possibly coming back, and the people were like, I mean, we guess.
Maybe, and people take their offspring as pets. Yeah,
they go on the black market for really high. It's great. Yeah, it's like so you funny. Can make a quick buck on that.
But yeah, so he's been having these interactions with Whippy, and there's that cleaner smell. And the reason he went into the janitor's closet to begin with and found Whippy there was because he hates the honey, the sweet, sickly honey smell.
What is this?
It's Whippy. He smells it whenever he's with Whippy. There is literally a point where they're outside and he can still smell it. It's because Whippy's been infected. The director herself smells it as well. Like, and who was it? Saul does. Right before, like, after that thing pricks him, he starts smelling the sweet honey smell. And he also smells it in the bar the night everything goes down. So it's Area X. But specifically, I think the sweet honey smell that he's getting all the time is Whippy. Like, Whippy just carrying it around with him. But anyway, and he wants to get the janitor to change it. And so he went into the janitor's closet, and that's how he found Whippy. But eventually, he's, like, at home one night, and he's thinking about things. He also, there's a cell phone that keeps never leaving him and showing back up. And then also his landlord, or his landlady is like, don't throw things in the yard, my guy. But eventually he has this moment where he was like, why was Whippy in the janitor's closet? And then he also realizes that he doesn't remember seeing a ceiling to the janitor's closet. And he's like, I want to go investigate that. So he goes in and he looks up, and there's all the shelves, but above the shelves there's just empty space. And he takes his phone and he flashes it up, and he sees that there is just a really high ceiling, and in the middle of and it's all painted black, but in the middle there is a square, which is obviously a door. And he's like, oh shit, there's something up there. He heard sounds above his office at one point. But anyway, so he goes and he's like, okay, I have to get up there. And then he looks, and hidden behind a tarp in the janitor's closet is a giant ladder. And he's like, oh shit. So he takes the ladder, he puts it up, he climbs up, and he climbs into a like storage area up there that has shelving, and there's also an easel and a bunch of paints and like a palette and all the stuff. And he shines his flashlight, and there's a wall in front of him, and it is covered with murals, like covered with murals. And the murals are the faces of the people who work in the Southern Reach, but attached to the bodies of weird animals, like half pig slug monsters. And he recognizes the faces, and there's him. And he is a kind of ferrety marmot creature but it's his face. Like, it's not even like an animalized version. It's just his face on this creature. And then around it, holding on to the marmot ferret creature, is a giant leviathan with one eye. And he is like, holy shit, what the fuck is this?
I've played a lot of video games where they do the graffiti as storytelling. I've watched a lot of horror movies with creepy visuals. Murals. This, to me, I can still see it in my head, and I only read about it. It was such a vivid image, and like, it's so creepy.
It reminds me a lot of the, like, I'm picturing almost like dark, beautiful, like darker palette, but with like the style of like Midsommar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the all those murals, but like with the weird, like that level of awkward disconcertingness.
Disconcerting.
You know, yeah, that with how like primal, I guess, It is, or is that the right word? Primal?
It's the, like, with the Midsummer, it's that, like, medieval where, like, the people's face it, like, it's enough to know it's a person, but it's not realistic at all. It's just, like, the lines of
it has an
thing.
uncanny valleyness to it.
He's creeped out, as the three of us were, and he's just looking at this, and he's like, oh my god. And then there's a moment.
The best part of this book, and maybe the entire series and everything we've read, the single line that's maybe the best thing we've read this year. Go ahead.
He realizes that he thought there was a breeze, but it's not a breeze. It's breathing. And that there's breath coming from behind him from the shelves. And he slowly turns and pans his flashlight. And on the shelf, lying sideways, squished with his knees up against under his chin, is Whippy. With that agonized look on his face. Pause real quick. The first time I read this, I threw the book. I just threw the book. I was reading the physical book. I was on my couch downstairs, and it just turned. There was Whippy on a shelf, and I threw the book. I was like, "The fuck
it's
you
so
doing?"
Good. I don't understand how it was so creepy, but it wasn't, because, and the thing is, the whole, like, and it was a person, I'm sure that's been done before, but it was so well done here.
Notice how it gave us, like, a really high detail, very vivid image of something that's very off-putting, and then it went to shortcut sentences with a lack of massive detail, and then also the little literal physical positioning of the characters, like something at the nape of your neck is always really, like, if it's not someone you know touching it, it's going to be really uncomfortable. It's creepy. So, and then that compared with him, but I think what makes it even scarier than anything is that Whippy isn't like, I'm going to kill you.
No,
he's just
in
pain.
Like a creepy little fucker. What is he doing? He's just chilling.
Squished on a shelf. And
did
so,
you guys think somebody was gonna be there? Like, is this like a naive horror? Like, because I did not think that was a possibility at the fuck all.
Listen, and the second time I read it, I knew Whippy was gonna fucking be there, and it still creeped me out. Like, I cannot describe to you the mastery of this scene. Like, just fucking read it. Like, it slogs throughout the whole thing just to enjoy the beauty that is this scene.
It's funny because it's like in a horror movie where all of a sudden the camera cuts and you see somebody standing behind him and it's scary, but it works here better than it does there because it's inherent to the prose that I think it works in that the prose just very simply say somebody was in the room with him. And so that kind of abstract knowledge is creepy. It's creepy in a way that just the visual of, like, you see him, but you couldn't do the breath thing. Like the whole idea of the breath suddenly realizing there is someone in the room versus just showing you an image, I don't think would work as well.
I think what really helps the narrative version is that when you say there was breathing on his neck or something to that effect, you can, with how good it's been set up, you can, when you think of that, you think of moist, hot, and you don't have to visually portray that. You have connotations that have to do with that. So you can do a lot more with a lot less. And then also, again, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that Whippy is just, he's not a malicious thing. Like, he pats his head. He, like, rubs his head like he's a good boy.
I thought of him as like a little Renfield mouse, like from like a Nosferatu type thing where he's just like hanging out there. Yeah, there's something in the way that I think that reveal only works as well as it does because it's in prose form and not some kind of visual medium. Because it was specifically like he thought there was a breeze, but it's not a breeze. Whereas if it was in real life, you'd be like, okay, obviously that sounds like a person breathing versus a weird air thing.
Okay, I'm gonna do it.
Dramatic.
Control had been standing there with his back to the shelves for only about a minute. He'd been standing there recognizing that there was a draft in the loft. He'd been standing there without realizing that it wasn't a draft. Someone was breathing behind him. Someone was breathing on his neck. The knowledge froze him, froze the cry of Jesus fuck in his throat. He turned with incredible slowness, wishing he could seem like a statue in his turning. Then saw, with alarm, a large, pale, watery blue eye that existed against a backdrop of darkness or dark rags shot through with pale flesh and which resolved into Whippy. Whippy, who had been there the entire time, crammed into the shelf right behind Control, at eye level, bent at the knees on his side. breathing in shallow, sharp bursts, staring out, like something incubating there on the shelf. It's just so good.
I think what's interesting about it, though, is reading it now, I think the reason it works is so much because of what's around it. Because
And it's the buildup. That on its own is
Yeah.
great, but it's the buildup. It's the, like, Katie
all of
hit
the
the nail
things
on the
he's
head.
done.
Yeah, Katie hit the nail on the head because you got the weird artwork on the wall that is already creepy and off-putting.
No, it's before that. Before that, it's the fact that there is a weird door in a janitor's closet that
Yep.
you have to get a freaking ladder to get to. Is, first of all, already, like, it already gave you that one scene, you know, where they talk about the silo-like stairwell, where they have to go to the science division, which I'd like to ask you guys something about that in a minute, but don't let me forget. But so there's like all these weird spaces in the Southern Reach, which makes you like, it almost like mimics, like, there are these mysterious weird places in Area X because it's mysterious. So
I think it also works because it's Whippy. In movies, there's a thing about like the conservation of cast. Like if there's it's like in a murder mystery, we kind of know there's like 3 people it can be if this is an hour-long procedural, you know? Whereas in this book, Whippy was creepy up until this point, but he wasn't creepy in a way that I expected fucking this from him. And so, but it also matches what comes before. It doesn't feel suddenly like, oh, that was wrong. You're like,
Weird.
oh shit. This is, it feels both connected to the world, but not expected.
And he talked about the room. He literally told us, hey, I have a room. Also, I don't know if we mentioned, but there's a bed in the room. Like, he's been like potentially living here. Also, on top of all of that, the Whippy being creepy, the weird rooms, there is a crescendoing because he has this huge realization that he's been missing something and then comes to the janitor's closet. So you as a reader are like, oh, the shit's happening. It's fucking going down, baby. And then there's a man on the shelf breathing on another guy's neck, and it is terrible. And the like palming of his head, which I know you guys spoke about, is just like one of the.
And I like how no words are, and then slowly but surely, Control turns his back to him, and he's like, I don't want to turn my back to him, but I have to. And he goes down the ladder, he puts it back with the tarp, and he closes the door behind him.
And just walks, and doesn't tell anybody. He doesn't tell anyone.
Yeah, that really bothered me.
Yeah. And then the next day he literally just goes home, and he comes in the next day and he's like, I'm gonna have to deal with this. I'm gonna have to talk with Whippy. We're gonna have to send him on psychological leave. I'm gonna need to talk to Grace. And he comes in with like a plan, right, to deal with it. And he ends up going to the science department to try like corner Whippy about it. And the door to the science department is gone. And he puts his hand on the wall, and it's breathing, and it's flesh. And you're like, oh shit. Area X is here. And he immediately is like, oh no, nope, I'm out. He's like, I'm leaving. And he's telling other people leave. And then the cafeteria is in like the center of everything, and it has giant doors and windows that lead out to a holding, what is it called? A
courtyard. It's a reservoir pond, and it's a courtyard.
Grace is at the door, staring out, like holding the door open, and he's like, Grace, what the fuck are you doing? So he goes up to Grace, and she's smiling, the happiest he has ever seen her, and coming towards them from the forest, from the direction of the border, is the old director. And
I almost picture her like as like not a zombie, but as like a weirdly vacant stare puppet of a human.
I do, but also with this like religious, like almost tranquility.
Yeah. This is like one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Yep. That's what this feels like, is like she's walking towards it, and behind her all of reality is kind of rippling, and he knows that the Southern Reach is coming with her.
Yeah, and the entire Southern Reach is about to go. Like, it's the border is here, it is hip hop. He's like, Grace, he tries pulling her and being like, Grace, let's go. Grace is, nope, she's there. So he gets in his car. He just drives off, and he goes home, and he's like having a complete panic attack. And who is on his front lawn but his mother? So obviously they knew something was up. And he also realizes in that moment that she's been here. She's been in Headley, which is the town he's been staying in this whole time, but keeping separate. And they have he has a huge panic attack, and his mom gives him some drugs to get him to calm down, and is basically like,
well, what we should say too is the way that this is written is really fascinating, because we spoke about it in a very linear fashion of him getting to the door, then getting to his house and the events that preceded it. But it's written really weird because all of that part happens very fast and almost like a summary.
Yeah.
And then as he's driving home, parts of it also start coming more into focus. And it's literally like time itself and reality has sort of been tearing in his perception of it. And he talks at one point later about, and you can also see it change. I think originally he doesn't say he tried to get Grace to come with him, and then later he does, and then later he goes, wait, no, didn't.
In this he does say it's in this that he does try to call Grace, but then later Grace gives her version of it, and he goes, maybe I made up my version. So it's giving you that unreliable narrator thing. Really quick though, I found a fantastic thing I want to read. Sorry guys. Control reached out for the large double doors, reached for the handle, missed it, tried again, but there were no doors where there had always been doors before, only wall, and the wall was soft and breathing under the touch of his hand. He was screaming, he thought, but from somewhere deep beneath the sea. So good.
This is such a great oh shit moment, because it's everything. It's literally that moment in the zombie apocalypse when you see the explosion in the distance and you know it's coming, and his mom is at his house hey, what's up, buddy? And he's like, I'm out. And she's like, okay, have some drugs and take a shower.
And basically what happens, because his mom also tells him in this moment, and she says, we fucked up. We were trying to prevent this, and some of us kind of knew, but everybody else wasn't listening. But also the previous director knew. She kept telling people the border was going to move, and nobody was listening to her. And then she brought it. Poetic justice. But he tells her, by the way, the biologist escaped almost immediately. We have no idea where she is. And this sets him on his next path, which is how the book ends, where he's like, I know where she's going. She's going to that rocky beach. And he chases her up the coast, ends up going to this little seaside town, and he's looking for her. He has to, he ends up bartering for a boat.
Well, okay, so the thing is, he's off the grid at this point. The agency, as he always says, or command or intelligence or whatever,
Central,
is going to be looking for him. And this part is cool because it does feel like he is almost completely out of sync with the world now. He knows the apocalypse is a coming, but they don't. He hears in the news some stuff about the Southern Reach, but either they've kept it contained or not. And so the thing that I didn't love about this is that in terms of motivation, I didn't quite get what was going on with him in terms of why does he feel... I think this is where the connection with the biologist is supposed to come in, but to me, it didn't quite feel like a sufficient motivation for him to go on this one last quest.
I agree. This is, and this fundamentally just goes back to the idea that the way he set up the connection with the biologist is based on him being interested in her as a person. And if he had legitimately thought she was holding some key to what was going on, then yeah, he would want to go find her to deal with this. But he does. That's not what is set up.
It doesn't his mother tell him not, or not? This is his idea to do this, isn't it?
Yeah, no, he's not supposed to do this.
Right? Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah. Okay,
I guarantee you, if his mom knew he was about to go AWOL, she would not have told him. And again, if it had been framed as he saw her as a bastion for answers, because he doesn't go to her seeking answers for shit. He just goes.
He's like, I have connection with the. I want to be close to the. Please.
You know what it feels like? It feels like, okay, he's going to get there, and then we're going to find out the reason. And that thing books do, where they're like, and this whole time it had been whatever. And then he gets there, and Vet does eventually meet her, and it's like, no, he just, this was the next thing he was going to do.
I thought it was going to be revealed that he was truly not John Rodriguez. And I was like, this is all made up. But I was like, that's too messy. If it is that, then it is really messy, and I don't like it. And then it never happened, and I was like, I'm both happy and unhappy.
This is by far the whole thing with John and the biologist is just the weakest portion of the entire series. Anyway, he finds her. She pulls a gun on him. She don't like. She's like, fuck you, because as far as she's known, from her point of view, this guy's been her captor and weird.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
pretty
looks at
much.
her boobs for like no reason out of nowhere while she's in a janitorial outfit.
He ends up being like, listen, what are we gonna do? And she's like, I think I released a door. She was like, I was feeling really sick and the brightness inside me was not doing good. And then I laid down in this pool over there. And then it like exploded out of me and now I feel fine. And then he looks in the bottom of the pool and he sees the same because he's seen the door that led into the border for Area X. He'd seen it before, and it has these like sparkly, twinkly lights. This is the part that made me think of the lights in Howl's Moving Castle. That
Yeah,
like
but it's
shimmering.
kind of weird. It almost makes it seem like she's the only perfected human copy of herself.
A little bit. I think part of it is that the biologist was more conscious in what she was doing when shit happened to her. But also, it just feels like they need someone hardy.
No, I don't think it's that they need someone hardy. I think that they were both adapting at the same time to what was necessary for the like mutation to occur on an equal level, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just thought it was weird. I'm not in a bad way, but I just thought it was weird that it was almost like like at that point the area X within her was more of a disease than a like originating point or something, and that she had to like release it for her to not get sick and probably die. Like, I just thought that was interesting.
I mean, I guess so. For me, it was more just like she was literally holding the doorway. And then once she expelled it and did the thing, like she had a function, which was to release the doorway. And once she did it, she could just be like her superpowered self.
Oh, I don't
that's
think of it that way.
Yeah, no, because she lies down in the thing, and then all of a sudden the brightness comes out of her, and now there is a doorway at the bottom of that tide pool that they have to jump into. And basically there's the tide pool and she goes, I can't live here. Like she basically is like, I thought I'd come here and I'd feel like I was part of something, but I still don't feel a part of something. I'm not supposed to be here. And she's like, yeah, and he's like, oh God, you're not gonna go back into Area X. And she was like, jump, motherfucker. And then he was like, now I have to jump. And again, I want a better reason for him to jump than what we're given, which is
Other than boobies.
but also it's basically at this point, like, what else is he gonna do? Like, what other choice does he have? But again, if he's like, I'm going to solve the problems, like, I would have liked if he was overly hopeful and like, no, we can fix this, we can fix this, we can fix this. And then in the end, he does fix it, but in a way that has him choose to.
It doesn't feel like he
with
jumps into that portal to try and save the world. That like, hey,
No.
the apocalypse has now started and I'm going to do what I can to stop it, even in
No.
the kind of desperate, mundane way of she went in there, so I'm going to follow.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I have nothing to lose. I'm just going to go jump in and follow her because
And it sucks because it would have been such a beautiful juxtaposition for him to go in this time and be like, I'm going to change the world. And then in the end, jump in and go, I'm going to allow it to change me. You know, that would have been such a good growth on his
Yeah,
part.
that would have been really interesting. That would have been a lot. Because, yeah, his decision at the end of book 3 too to me feels very you know what's funny, I think he's just the weakest aspect of the series and I like him as a character, but like
Yeah,
there's so
I like him a lot.
His interiority is both very detailed but also sort of vacant at a base motivational level.
So they jump in. Welcome to the third book. We're gonna kind of speed through this. There are 3 plot lines. Plot line 1, the director. This is told from the point of view in second person of the old director. And by second person, we mean, I'm saying the narrative literally goes, you laid there at the foot of the lighthouse, dying, and the biologist came up. But it is the old director. The voice actor for this, while I didn't like her voice for Grace, I really liked her voice and like her narration for the director. What is happening is we start with her last scene, which is her dying, which we saw in the first book with the biologist, but we saw it from the biologist's point of view, and this time we get it from her point of view. But it basically goes back to her at the Southern Reach kind of coming up, and her timeline kind of jumps around a little bit, but it is her getting to the point where she decides to go into Area X, what her plans are. And the most important thing we learn is that we mentioned in the first video that there is a photo of the lighthouse keeper, and it's him and a man standing next to him and a little girl with a hood on the rocks. Cynthia is the girl on the rocks whose name was Gloria. She grew up in Area X and is fundamentally one of the only survivors of what was called, even from back then, the Forgotten Coast. And what we get is that she has tried really hard to hide who she is from the Southern Reach because she thought it would compromise, and also because like being known as like the person from there, and just separating herself from like the death of her mom and everything, because her mom, she lived with her mom there and then ended up going to visit her father when all of this happened, and she is like as far as she knows, the only person who had been living in Area X before it happened, because everybody died inside of it, or presumed died inside of it day of. And she has been working hard to kind of figure out what is happening because of that. And the other point of view we get is Saul Evans, who is the lighthouse keeper. And we see him in the first book. We hear about him in the second book, and he is the crawler, that creature that the biologist saw at the bottom of the tower. The Southern Reach knows that Saul Evans is the creature in the tower. Enough people, I guess, have come out of it. And we're getting his point of view. He previously was a preacher. He did sermons for a living. Makes sense. If you watched the first video, and you know that the writing on the wall sounds very sermon-like. And it is basically him as a retired preacher living as a lighthouse keeper. And it is beautifully mundane in his day-to-day life. Each of his chapters starts with a little clip of his journal, which is like, did this maintenance thing today. Saw these birds. There was a dead fox. Armadillos are getting into the garden again. And you're getting his interaction with the lighthouse, which again is at the center of whatever has happened in Area X or will happen in Area X. But you also get him interacting with baby Gloria when she was a 9-year-old. And he is very fond of her, and she's like leaping around on rocks dangerously, and he's like constantly concerned, but she's really sure-footed. You also get him interacting with his lover, Charlie. What you discover about Saul is that he spent like the last few years as a preacher. Like one of the things that he relied on was the shame of what he had in himself kind of fueling his sermons, and then eventually getting to a point where he was like, I need to walk away. I've said too much. I'm becoming sad and bitter.
The other big thing that happens in his storyline is that there are these weird hippie ghost people who are coming and messing with his lighthouse, and he does not like these big city slickers. He's like so hilariously grumpy about it.
Yeah, the Seance and Science Brigade, which is a term we have heard before in book 2 a couple of times. They talk about the Seance.
It's very anime. It was very anime.
Yeah.
Like, I got very big anime vibes from them.
And basically what it is they are a group that investigates paranormal phenomenon or a potential paranormal phenomenon, but from a scientific perspective, and the paranormal sciencey magic or seancey magic perspective, thus the Seance and Science Brigade. And it's these two. They talk about them as if they're twins, but I'm not actually sure if they're twins.
I don't think
it's Henry.
They're husband and wife.
No, they're not. They're definitely not husband and wife. But it's Henry and Susan, and he hates them. Henry shows up in his goddamn silk shirts and these boots that were not built for the terrain around the lighthouse. Susan is a hippie. And he's like, originally you would think Henry was the science one, but it was actually Susan. Henry was the seance guy. So it's his interactions with Charlie, his interactions with Gloria, which tell you who he is as a person, what the things that he kind of values, and then his interaction with the Science Brigade. And they are looking at the lighthouse. And through Saul's point of view, you learn that the lens in the lighthouse has had a grand history. It originally was from Europe. It ended up coming, and it was in a lighthouse on the island across the way, which they refer to as Failure Island, and basically anything that happened on that island didn't go well. So originally the lighthouse was over there. It didn't, there was a lighthouse over there and the lens was there. It didn't go great. So then they moved it onto this side and into this lighthouse, and it's been here ever since. And they are doing readings and studies of the lighthouse, but they also go over to Failure Island and study that lighthouse as well. So there's the idea of these two spaces being kind of connected. And he don't like it. He don't like them. And there's literally a point where he finds like a little hole drilled into the lens, and he's like, who the fuck is messing with my, like, this is an expensive, it came from your, can you not do this right now, dude?
You're making broad hand movements.
No, he's trying to eat my hair because I have the door closed. Give me 1 sec, I have to open it, otherwise he's not gonna stop. So he's not happy with them, and they're kind of dicks. And one day,
I hate Henry.
Henry
is my least favorite character. I want to fucking kill him.
Henry's the worst. Henry is the catalyst for everything that is awful, but also only part of the catalyst. But anyway, so there's a point where after he's discovered the hole in the lens,
we should say also then the third plot line is Control and Ghostbird now going through the island trying to figure out what happens. They originally don't get along super well. They eventually meet Grace, who we figure out has been there for 3 years because time works differently on the inside.
Oh, that was such a good review.
What I love about Grace is he goes, like, I thought you were going to join the director. And she goes, no, that wasn't the real director, so I shot her. I was like, Grace, you are such a fucking badass.
I love her.
The minute she realized that ain't the director,
she was like, nope, I did what she told me to. I shot her.
And everyone, because like there was a military base there. There was everyone who worked at the Southern Reach. Everyone is dead except for Grace. Like everyone, and they think
for a very specific reason.
They think it's been a week. They think it's been a week at best that since they've been in there. But and when they were crossing from the mainland to the island, there was a military convoy that had just been decimated, like dead bodies, but like decayed. And they're like, why is everything so old? The military has only been here for a week. There shouldn't be bleached bones on the beach, scraps of fabric. And then Grace is like, yeah, it's been 3 years, guys. And they're like, oh shit, things work differently. And Ghostbird is like, where's the biologist? Because Ghostbird's entire thing is she wants to come face to face. Like, she wants to see whose memories she has, and in an attempt to differentiate herself. Like, if she can see the difference between them, she can claim herself as a unique.
Well, it's a pretty big difference now.
Well, it's hilarious as Ghostbird is, as an alien, such a nicer person than the biologist ever was. She's so much friendlier and warmer.
She is.
She's like really nice. Like, she's not really nice. She's still sort of a little bit distant and stuff, but like she feels so much more like a person than the biologist ever did. And
I think that's the point.
And there's this beautiful moment where, like, and Will mentioned it in the last video, where she's literally like, and if she saw me, she'd probably just like look at me funny and take a sample and like put it under a microscope to see what's happening. Like, there would be no bonding. She just has a sense, Ghostbird has a sense of being displaced in the world and trying to find her place and what she's supposed to be doing. And she's like, where's the biologist? And her and Grace are having like a standoff. And she's like, you've told us, because Grace ends up telling them it's been 3 years, all this other stuff. And then she's like, but you're still not telling us where the biologist, because like at first she's like, where's the biologist? And she's like, you haven't asked me how long I've been here. And they're like, how long have you been here? 3 years. And then they're like, no. Okay, that's horrifying, but you're deflecting. Where's the biologist? And then in that moment, they feel a gentle shaking of the earth beneath them, and they hear rustling up on a hill. Something is coming down. Something gigantic is coming down this hill. And Grace goes, she's coming here. And you're like, oh God, what is happening? Oh, wait. I have to rewind. I skipped something. We get her book.
We get her book where she said, which was like, she just started writing again after a couple of years having been on the inside.
30 years.
A couple years. What? It's a couple years.
So many. No, 30 years is so many.
Okay, she started writing again after 30 years. And basically she talks about how she just like started living in the zone. Like, she was just fine with it. And she found an owl who was like really chill with her, and she was really chill with the owl, and she thinks it was her husband. Her husband turned into an owl, and the owl always stays very close to her and gives her some food, and like they basically live happily for like 30 years, which, to be fair, I think a lot of marriages would be better if one of the parties couldn't talk and their only way of showing affection was dropping off small animals. So relatable.
Yeah, I think it was actually
No, really, she's so much happier with him as an owl than all the problems they had as humans. It's really
100%.
funny.
He's the bird now, motherfucker. Staring and watching in the corner, not saying or contributing anything to conversations. But yeah, the other thing that happens is she sees finally the actual form of the psychologist of the 11th expedition. And it is that half-boar slug creature, which Whippy drew. It was on the wall. But it has a human face. Like the face, it's like a giant body, and then it comes down on a tiny neck, and it's just the face. And she looks at it and she thinks, is that what's going to be me? Like she's assumed that she would just turn into like the dolphin or the pig thing that she killed, like something that integrates with nature. But what is this? Everything else Area X has done has been perfect in a way, you know? It has been more seamless. What mistake has happened here? What was it trying to do? And then she thinks, is because she has this whole time been actively holding off the brightness through pain, through injuring herself, through poison, because the brightness will not let her die. And so if she poisons herself, it will focus on healing her and not turning her into something. And so using these things, using pain, she has held it off. And she's like, I wonder if because I've held it off, I will be like that thing. It's got these two little things on its side and it just keeps going around in a circle while it's sleeping. It's real gross. It's not fun.
It's sad. I just picture a maggot.
She also finds on the center of the island a city, like not a city, like a decrepit old village. And in one of the buildings, she finds evidence of the S and SB, which she doesn't know what it stands for. And I forgot what she called it, but it was funny. And she basically realizes that somebody was investigating the lighthouses and that previously had been super disorganized, but just at the end started getting really organized, like almost as if someone new had taken over and was really focusing their efforts. And that in particular, it was the lens of the lighthouse they were into. And so you're getting Saul as the lighthouse keeper. You're getting Gloria from her point of view. And so you're like, oh God, shit's gonna go down.
You're like, okay, all the threads are drawing together. We've got these separate things. Is the director, because before, what if Surface says, you're like, okay, is the director's replica coming back? Was that the director herself? Because we did get the moment of her dying. So like, why did we get that if it wasn't going to happen? Is the director herself going to come up? Is Saul? What's going to happen with Saul? We'll talk in a little bit about how that all wraps up. At this point, it's still very exciting.
I think it's exciting the entire way through. Once again, we're going to have disagreement, guys, but it's okay. But yeah, so they finish reading the biologist's last will and testament. And then she looks up at her and she's like, okay, you've given me that. You told us the other thing, but where is she? And that's when they're like, the hill is moving. The rest
the owl died. That was her husband.
Oh,
and
yes.
At that point,
the owl
she was like, meh. I'm done.
And then she's like, oh, and that's the thing is she's like, I'm just going to let it take me. I'm going to give up. I'm going to stop fighting it. I'm going to be what I'm going to be, take the wheel, Area X, and so then they close the book and they're like, where is / what happened to the biologist? And Grace is like, she's coming here. And again, shaky hill. It's something coming down the hill. And Grace is like, we gotta get out of here. And Control's like, absolutely. But no, not Ghostbird. She's like, this is what I fucking came for. She goes up and she's looking out the window, and coming down the mountain is a Leviathan, or the hill is a Leviathan. This so big, it has tide pools on its back, like craters that are filled with waters that have sea urchins and anemones and starfish on it. And it is a creature that can be simultaneously in the water and on land, and it has these almost like hidden gills. And covered in eyes, and not just like whale eyes. It is the biologist's eyes. So it is Ghostbird's eyes, hundreds of them, staring at her staring at it. It bulldozes into the lighthouse. The lighthouse is barely, and it's the decrepitated lighthouse on the shitty island. It's barely holding itself together, and she's looking at the biologist is looking at her, and it's this like intense creepy because like the biologist is just now this giant fucking thing. And it's terrifying, but it's great and it's fantastic. And then eventually the biologist, like they all, like I think Control passes out. And then when he wakes up, the biologist is gone and Grace is like, yeah, she comes here and she comes to the site that she found the bird. Like she remembers and she's visiting. And the beautiful part is Ghostbird's reaction to this, which is realizing she thinks the biologist is happier and is an almost perfect creature. It can do land. It can do sea. It will lay still enough that entire ecosystems can live on it, which is, if you know the biologist, her dream.
It has thousands of eyes that can see everything.
It can observe everything in all directions. But there's also this moment where she's like, she feels like it's not like the seas it is swimming in is not just the seas around this area. And you're like, oh my God, is this like a space whale? Like, what is happening? And so basically this happens and they're like, well, what the heck are we gonna do? And well, no, Grace is like, we gonna survive. And Ghostbird's like, yeah, no, I'm pretty chill with that. And Control's like, no. We have to do something. Something has to be done. And he's like, we have to go to the crawler. We have to go to the tunnel. We like that is like a potential origination point. We have to figure out, like, we have to go and deal with whatever is happening there. And they're like, that sounds like a suicide mission. But then they're also like, well, what are our choices? And there's a moment where they realize one of them is like, well, Grace must have been holding everything at bay using pain as well. What is she going to become? So the three of them start trekking that way. I'm now going to go back to stuff that's been happening with the other characters, particularly Saul. So Saul discovers the hole in his lighthouse in his lens from those damn kids and their shenanigans. And he's outside with Gloria, and they're kind of complaining about the SNSB. And there is a plant that he's never seen before, and it's got these leaves that kind of come out. Like, if you look at it like straight down, it's a circle, but if you look at it on the side, it's a spiral. And it has a flower that has these white petals. And he reaches down to look at it because something is shining kind of by the base of it. And he touches it, and it pricks him in his hand, even though he's wearing his thick gardening gloves, or his I don't think they're gardening gloves, they're like utility gloves, but they're very thick and nothing should have gone through it. And he rips the glove off and he looks and there's nothing there, but he felt the pain. He felt something enter him specifically. And Gloria's like, what happened? And then also he looks up and Henry and Susan are looking down at him like,
I hate that. I hate that they treat him like a science experiment.
It's the goddamn worst. My Saul didn't deserve it. And after this point, Saul starts not feeling great. And he starts like running a fever. And Gloria comes by like the next day and is like, you're different. Like, are you okay? And he's like, I'm not sure. And she's like, you should go to the doctor. By the way, my mom's a doctor.
A pediatrician, to be specific.
And basically she's like, nah, it looks fine, but we'll like, if you don't feel good again in a couple of days, come back. I'm going to pause there and go over to Gloria as an adult in the Southern Reach. You get a lot of like her trials and tribulations with what she's trying to do. You get like Lowry kind of controlling her ascent into the Southern Reach. You also get the scene where she like right before she leaves, where her and Lowry kind of go at it. But one of the things that is important is when she came, her and Whippy went into Area X, and you kind of get the lead up into her deciding to do it. Grace being like, that's kind of fucking insane, but like, you're going to do it, so I might as well help you. And Whippy, the Whippy we get from this is much more like loud. It's, he's, got a lot of ideas. He's not just like a clock in, clock out pencil pusher that we see, when Control deals with him. And when she decides she's going to go into Area X, she asks Whippy if he'll come, and he says yes. And they end up going in, and they find the topographical anomaly, which is what they call the tower. And she decides to go in, and she walks in, and she goes in during a point where the crawler is not writing. Like, the words on the wall are faded. They're not really like that living material just yet, but they're like highlighter blue. And she goes down, and sitting on one of the last steps that she gets to is Saul, but green. Like, he's got the halo-y spiky bits, or the halo-y circles around him, but it's Saul. It's not the creature, but it's like he's asleep, like he's powered down. And she sits next to him, and he says something like, "Be careful, it's dangerous out there." And it is dialogue that he said to her when she was young, that you have seen in a previous scene where she was on the rocks and she was like jumping from rock to rock.
Mm-hmm.
And she connects the two, and like, it's weird because it's this person that, and she says multiple times that one of the things he told her was, "Don't forget me." Like, one of the last things he said to her. And we haven't seen that scene yet, so it's going to be like the last scene, one of the last scenes with Saul. But that, here he is saying this thing, and she ends up saying something to him, and then all of a sudden, it's like the mechanism of the tower turns on. And she starts and then she hears Whippy screaming. So like, something is coming up from the bottom of the tower. She hears Whippy screaming bloody ass murder. So she runs up the stairs. Whippy is freaking out. And what Whippy tells her, because she doesn't tell him she tells him, but she doesn't tell him, like, "Hey, it's Saul, the lighthouse keeper, who was a friend of mine growing up." Whippy had a duel with his double while he was up there waiting for her. And he killed the double, and the double had a plant and a cell phone. And you are not sure, and neither is Gloria, which Whippy survived that duel. Was it original Whippy, or was it doppelganger Whippy? And you, as a person, as a reader, never know and never find out. I think you can make arguments either way. But that's what she has.
And this is also the plant and cell phone that Control found in book 2. And the cell phone that specifically won't leave, which at first was creepy, but then I found a little cute, honestly, by book 3.
I know!
But it won't leave. It wants to stay with the people it wants to stay with.
Especially like the one scene where it says little bug. But anyway, so they end up going back. And they get caught. She's kind of put on probation for a while. Whippy gets to go back to work after a bit once he's assessed that he's fine. But Whippy is forever, like, it is a different Whippy. And this is the point. There's a throwaway line in book 2 where, when Control is looking at the files, he notes that there was a 1-year period where Whippy just every month requested to be sent somewhere else and to get a different job. Every month, just requested. And then it just stopped. And like, it happened out of nowhere. He had been there like 16 years. And then all of a sudden, just 1 year of constant requests for transfer. And then it stopped. And so he has been greatly psychologically affected by this. She is also affected by this. And there is a kind of push and pull between her and Lowry about what needs to happen, and Central, because there's like what Lowry wants, what Central wants, and what Gloria thinks should happen. But she also doesn't know. Like, a huge thing you find out from her point of view is Grace thought she had a plan, and Grace believed strongly that she knew what she was doing and she had a plan. Gloria didn't. Gloria had some hunches, and she rolled with it, and she really misread our girl Grace.
Gloria is interesting because she's basically 3 different characters in each of the books. And the psychologist, the director, and Gloria, if you go by first, second, and third book, are 3 very different presences. Because in the first one, you're like, what the fuck is going on? She's an agent of whatever. And the second one, you're like, oh shit, she's bringing the apocalypse. She got compromised by the area. And then the third one, you're like, oh, she was tired of her job and had cancer. Like, that was kind of her in the third book.
We find out she has cancer. But anyway, she decides to go back into when the last, when they're trying to work on the 12th expedition. Also, there's something we haven't mentioned, but there's been way more than 12 expeditions. Like 36 in total. Like, but they don't talk about them that way. They're like Expedition 11.
There was 8, 9, 10, 11, 11A, 11B, and then up to like 11, a whole bunch. And like, Control is never quite sure why they did that. It's just dumb.
She decides when she finds out that she has cancer that she's going to be part of the next expedition that goes into Area X, because she needs to change something. She also chooses the biologist. Like, she meets the biologist. The biologist's husband had previously went in, and yet that doesn't seem to be what's drawing the biologist to this place. And there's something about her that she's like, we've never sent anyone in like this bitch. She feels like she's probably gonna love this place. Maybe that's what we need to shake shit up.
Yeah, she got a lot of emotional issues and some maybe like not neurotypical.
So she's like, we're gonna send her in. But like, one of the last things that happens with her and Whippy before she leaves is Whippy and the rat or the mouse. And there's this scene where Whippy is out by the little pond off of the cafeteria, and he is washing a mouse. Like, he's holding a white mouse, and he's spooning water onto it, and he's rubbing it into its little belly, but like also holding its neck, and then wiping it down. And she's like, Whippy, are you okay, my dude? And then there's a little report where he's like, don't be condescending. He's like, I have a pet rat, a pet mouse. This is how I relax. We've been through shit. And because like he's weirdly focused and creepy, but then he has this moment of clarity where he's like, don't judge my coping mechanisms. And it's those like the moment of like old Whippy coming out, like the Whippy we're seeing here is transitioning from like trauma Whippy and old Whippy to the Whippy we're going to get in book 2. And so that moment where he's like, don't judge my coping mechanisms, feels more like the Whippy she dealt with before. And she also, because she says, where did you get that mouse? And he's like, I found it in the attic. And she thinks it's the attic of his house. No, it's the creepy room. It's the creepy room. And she's like, don't bring it. And he's like, I'll keep it in the attic. And she's like, okay, good. Don't bring it to work. That sounds good. Nope, this is the attic. Like, we're not, it's nothing good. And so it ends up going to, I'm going to pause there and go to Saul, because the last scenes really need to be described closer together.
Do they? But go ahead.
Will and I think, are just tired.
No, here's the thing.
No,
is that,
he doesn't like the ending.
No, that's not actually even it. So the thing is that I have an issue with 2 out of the 3 of these plot lines, but I'm trying to figure out when I should bring it up to be like the listeners will have enough context to understand. Because I actually just don't think 2 out of 3 of these plot lines contribute anything to the book.
I would fully disagree in general, but
I don't even care which 2 of the 3 you think it is.
I know.
Fundamentally distree.
Yeah, so we should probably wait for the end before we talk about it, because it does have to do with the ending.
So she's talking to Whippy about the mouse. He says the plant bloomed, because remember, they brought back a plant and a cell phone. Number 1 about this plant, they've tried to kill it multiple times. The science department, as an offhand thing, were like, it doesn't die. And then they tried to make it die at multiple points. There's literally a great scene where she's like, they probably could have dehydrated it, cut it up, put it on a steak. She could have eaten it, and then it would have grown out of her stomach. And it's that same plant Saul was looking at with the spirally leaves, but if you look at it head on, it's a circle. And while he's cleaning the rat or the mouse, he's like, oh yeah, the plant bloomed. And she's like, what the fuck you mean the plant bloomed? And he's like, oh, don't worry about it, it's fine now, it's gone. Like the bloom literally just disintegrated. And she's like, why didn't you tell me? And he's like, because it disintegrated and I didn't think it was important. And because you saw the scene with Saul, the flower, the plant, and you're like, this is what brought Area X in with them. And Whitby has become the Saul of this new expansion of Area X, because he was there when the flower bloomed, just like Saul was there when the flower bloomed. So 2 things now. 1, you already know that Whitby had whatever to do because of the second book to bring the border forward. He was somehow involved because he creep. But that Saul also dealt with the flower in bloom and got pricked. And so you're like, and you knew this already, you're like, something's gonna happen with him. He becomes the crawler. But you also learn in that moment that he is probably going to be the epicenter of the change for turning the Forgotten Coast into Area X. And so I really like the mirroring of these 2, and getting these bits kind of piecemeal as you're reading works really well, in my opinion. Back with Saul, he is still not feeling great. And then he has one day where he feels really good. But he keeps having these dreams. and the dreams are really intense, and like there's one where the moon is filling with blood and then it falls out of the sky, and he begins to hear the words of the sermon, and he has to fight really hard to keep them at bay while he is doing his daily life. And you see, unbeknownst to him, it is implied, but you see as a reader that it's not working as well as he thinks it does, because you're at the beginning of each of his chapters, you get a little blurb from his diary, and it's like, Armadillo was in the garden again, and from my hand the vine right blah blah blah. And I really need to fix the fence. And so it's seeping into him. It is, he can't keep it back, and you're just like, no, son, I love you. And like, he told Charlie about it. Charlie's worried. Gloria's kind of worried, but then he has that one day where he feels like pretty good about everything. And then he also has a dream where Henry's there, and him and Henry, like, it's like weird shit's happening. And so you're like, oh, that Henry motherfucker must be related. And then there's one night where he comes back to his lighthouse and the beam is off at the top.
No, he was sleeping and he woke up from a fever dream.
He has that dream that I was just talking about, and he goes upstairs and he's kind of almost off put by it as he's walking up, and he gets up there and it's Henry, Suzanne, and a woman, Jackie fucking Severance. And it's great because the book doesn't tell you it's Jackie Severance, but they're like, and she's wearing a scarf, and you're like, Jackie always wears scarves. I'm a heckin' detective. And it also, because for me, the moment that I first was like, were John's parents, like, was Jackie involved, was the moment when Ghostbird was like, and then it looked like new leadership took over and things got way more organized, and I was like, this sounds like the Severance family.
So I actually really didn't like this element of either the SB Brigade or Jackie being there, because it kind of feels like that thing in sitcoms where like they do a flashback episode and characters who originally were not connected all had lives all around each other. Or like anytime there's a prequel, we need to explain not only like how Han Solo grew up, but also where did he get the Millennium Falcon? Where did he get Chewbacca? Where did he get his gun? It all has to be done in like one movie. There's a sense that to me, the Southern Reach became less scary when it became something that didn't just inexplicably happen, but it was part of a government. The government were looking into it, and they screwed up and released it through drilling in the hole, and like I just didn't like that as much. It feels creepier to me as an inexplicable thing.
See, it's still creepy to me in the fact that it was literally like a seed inside of a lighthouse
that I did
lens,
like.
Which
that
is
I did
so
like.
weird. I didn't like the Seance and Science Brigade that much. Like, it didn't add anything like extra pizzazz where I'm like, oh wow, that was really good. But it makes sense for the origin story, and it's fine with me.
For me, the Seance and Science Brigade represents a part of humanity that terrifies me. And that's that push to know everything, even if knowing it might lead to bad things. And so for me, I understand where both of you are coming from, but for me, I found them incredibly terrifying. And the fact that they always seem to know more, and like they were like,
I did not like them. No, I don't mean that. I mean, I didn't like them. It's because they fucking creeped me out.
Yeah.
Like, they were really, really malicious in nature. Which was weird and even scarier.
Yeah, and so for me, it did work. And what I liked was that Henry was solo agenting it. Like, he wasn't supposed to do that. Like, that had not been part of like Suzanne and Jackie. Like, and there's a point where I think Jackie mentions that like things kind of got, or it's implied that things got out of hand, and that was something he had done without their approval. And so I like the idea of this all happening because of one guy being an absolute shithead. And also I'm with Katie. I found the SNSD to be very creepy and like malicious. And
see, I didn't find them creepy at all. I think it's one of these things where if I had read this as the first book, I would be like, oh, this is so creepy. The government is screwing with things it doesn't understand. But I already know this happened, so it just becomes like, oh, we needed to explain things that didn't really need to be explained.
I like it.
I mean, this is going to come down to the fundamental issue of what what is the point of the director and Saul's storylines?
But also, I think it really all comes. I think Henry's story is important to note. It's because it all comes back down to the biologist in the end. Like the need to know or understand the biologist in the beginning. Like it's a marketed choice she makes between the beginning and the end of always taking samples versus accepting things for the way they are. And like not seeking answers. And that's what the Henry problem is that he sought answers, I guess, although it's very mysterious, at the expense of others.
It's a similar quest. It's not at the expense of others, but it is a similar quest. It's at the expense of herself. She throws herself, like, again, she literally went in, breathed that spore without it. So it's at the expense of herself. With Henry, it's at the expense of others. So I do think
it's not a direct parallel, but I think it's one that works very well in a literary sense.
It's a good comparison. Yeah. Like they're two foils of each other.
Is it though?
It is.
Again, we're going to run into a problem that I don't think that there's a thematic message to this series, or if there is one, it's one that excludes stuff like that, because I don't see that messing or not messing with science or things you don't understand is a core theme of the series. Really?
No, it's not.
I wouldn't say that it is.
Theme. I would say in that regard.
No, I wouldn't say that's the theme. What I would say that this is exploring, that I think all of this do, is the sense of inevitability of cosmic change, of universal change, of things beyond our understanding, and also the need to develop, like how in some cases you cannot help developing with it, and in other cases you can choose to, like Saul does not choose his fate at all.
But I think that would have been stronger if Area X just happened instead of it being something that was let out by a researcher through human will.
I don't think it harms it. Like I think the message works. I don't think, because you're right, it doesn't need that, but I don't think that doing it that way harms that message.
But I think that's important too, in its own way. I think that really at the core of everything, just the theme is you cannot control everything,
but you can choose to roll with it at certain points.
Yes.
And also about like it's about people and sadness and separation and like how
finding yourself, but also
losing yourself and loss. Like it's and how
I don't even feel like there's a particular thesis to any three of these books.
That me too. I agree with that.
And how to become just a function is like you can lose a part of yourself, because like Saul went from who he was to the crawler. He literally just functions as the crawler. I think if you want a very clear here's what it's about thesis statement, like it's
what we discussed just now is solid, but simultaneously I don't feel like he went out there and was like, yes, I have like something that I'm building my world around. Instead, it just so happened that these themes existed within the story he was telling.
Yes, and I think that that's okay. I don't think every story needs to have a central theme or a central thesis, because there have been times where stories go too far in the other direction and they just like...
Yeah, that's just a fundamental difference then. I do.
You mentioned this like a lot, like, and sometimes you're right in where like the story will just have like nothing, like it's not trying to deal with any higher concepts, but this is actively dealing with higher concepts. It's just not one unified one.
It may not be one unified one, but it still needs to build those arguments in a way that's legible from beginning, growing it, saying something about it. But again,
I don't think literature needs to be making an argument.
Me either.
I think if it makes you think about things, if it makes you analyze, assess what you think of, and this book makes you think about things, like it made me think about change myself, how these characters interact. Is there actually a bad guy? I don't actually think Henry is a bad guy. I think he was a guy trying to do something.
It's kind of like The Story of a Moment, right? You know that short story?
I haven't read it.
I feel like if I start describing it, you'll remember it, because it's literally like 3 pages long, and like everybody reads it in their intro to LA class. But it's about a woman who thinks her husband's dead from a train crash. And then she's like, she has this moment, she's like, oh my God, wow, I'm free. That's awesome. I mean, sad, but it's awesome because I'm free. And women in my age don't get to be free. That's pretty cool. Then she comes downstairs, sees her husband, and has a heart attack and dies. Because he didn't actually die on the train, like thought. And I don't think there's a theme to that. I think it's
just
a
clear thesis or argument.
I think there is.
You could argue for it, but I don't think
I think it is exploring a bunch of different things, because like we said, the inevitability of like cosmic change, the like people versus function, and again, it's not coming to solid arguments like endpoints for you, but like I don't need that. As long as it is making me think and engage with the things.
See, I don't know that I would agree that it is even building them that complexly. Part of it is that there is not, a clear character arc for like Control or even Ghostbird to a certain extent.
I would agree.
I think there is for
agree.
Ghostbird.
Ghostbirds is like Ghostbird, not really. I mean, she has one insofar as I'm not that woman. Who am I? I went on this trip and now I'm my own person, but it's not.
Yeah. I agree with you, Will. There are there's some character arcs, but they don't get finished, really, truly. And I think that's sort of not intentional, but I think the author didn't care about that.
Okay, but so then what did the author care about? Because the thing about it is, if you're not going to have a tight, cohesive thematic message, or not tight, cohesive.
Why do you need one?
Because that's the point of literature, is to explore
different
things and say something and express ideas.
It's to explore different things and to make people think about different things and different ideas. This book does that.
This comes down to a different and philosophical expectations of literature. This is a whole other.
Are you going to tell me that this book didn't make me think about things, analyze things, assess things, or like leave me with a sense of hopelessness and yet hope at the same time, for that even within a situation that you cannot control, you can go with it, and by evolving with it, enact a small amount of change to make it more cohesive for humanity as a whole? Because like I had that.
You could also get that from like the rainbow fish. Like that's I understand what you're saying, but also there are rules within literature. Like it's not all just empty space where anything goes. There are generally rules after first axiomatic principles in literature of what is good writing and what isn't, what is a good story versus what isn't. And what I'm saying is that when there aren't clear plot lines, there's not necessarily clear character growth, it seems like he should be trying to make a very distinct thematic point, and he isn't really with these three storylines. 2/3 of this book actually have no effect on the end. They don't.
But that's not the point of those plot lines.
But that's my point then. But you just said, then what is the point?
But it's about the characters. It's about the characters, the emotionality you get with them, the bonds you build with them, and how their stories are heartbreaking. And we know the end, but they are impactful and heartbreaking despite knowing the end and the inevitability of it, because we know what's happening. Saul doesn't. We get to watch him collapse. I mean, then it's similar, like again with Dune, we know the end, but by telling us we don't know the end, we know what's going to happen at the end of the first third, but despite telling that, we're able to follow and still have a reaction, not as much of a reaction as you would have wanted.
But again, there was what you could argue though, right? Again, not to bring this up again, but it is a good example. Not that I even love Hemingway that much, but Hills Like White Elephants has no theme, yet it is a good piece of literature. Literature does not have to have that exact theme, and it is super subjective as to what is, like, there are some objective terms of what is objectively good and bad literature, but there is a certain level that once you reach that base level of that, you can branch off from there, and at that point become like again, there's what is it? That one, something on something street, Papaya Street or something like that. It's like a coming of age story. Yeah, and it literally has
Mango Street, I think.
Yeah, the house on Mango Street. There you go, nice. And like there are many themes in it, of course, because you can write papers on it, and it's like super easy to do that. But the point is they're all like
it's exploring multiple things. Yeah,
it's exploring emotional pieces all knitted together in a menagerie of like no massive theme, but just life experience.
I think the emotional journey of those two characters justifies the existence of their plot lines, and the reader's journey of watching those is enough to justify it.
See, I don't even think that. I just think Area X's portrayal. It's Area X's portrayal through the vision of several different characters' eyes, and that's all it is. And it's all central based on the idea of like this extraterrestrial force that's going to change something horrifically. And I think that has like maybe at the core of all this, the inspiration is literally cancer. Maybe it's
So
just cancer.
I think what this is this is a Tom Bombadil situation where some people love Tom Bombadil and other people hate him because he adds nothing to the plot and kind of thematically is weird if the One Wing doesn't affect him. But other people, they love Tom Bombadil because he's fun. And so I feel like that's kind of what you guys are arguing for, is that like if it's a good element, it should be kept in regardless of its like its feng shui with the other elements in the book.
Again, I think it is fitting within the elements of the book. I
Me
think
too.
this is. I think Katie's right. The problem is I need to sit down and think about this more than I have at this point to adequately explain it. And so I'm not going to keep saying the same thing over and over again. At some point, I'll think about it, and Will and I will have a conversation off video, which has happened. Will and I have sometimes, like, we've done videos, and then I call Will like a week later, and we rehash something because I've like come to terms with it in my head.
Include me in this one because I have a stake in it.
Okay. So the basic end of the book is Saul goes out for a night out with Charlie before Charlie has to go night fishing, and they go to a bar. It's the only bar in the tiny town, and there's a band playing, and Saul had been feeling much better, and then he started not feeling super good again. And while he's at the bars, things start, like, reality starts kind of unfolding a little bit. The person on the keyboards is kind of like playing erratically. He is eating a massive amount of food, just like a massive amount. And then all of a sudden, like, chaos, like the guy on the piano, like, can't stop playing and is bashing his fingers in. There are people like crawling across the floor, and it kind of devolves almost like Gaiman Sandman-esque into like a scene of chaos. And luckily Charlie left before all of this happened. Like, he tells him, like, go, you're gonna be late for your shift, go. And also Gloria has left. We see the last scene with him and Gloria before she leaves to go to her dad's house, and we see the moment where he says, you know, don't forget me while you're at your dad's house, like. So during the scene, he thinks, I'm glad that they left. I'm glad that they're both gone. But he tries to get home. He gets in his car. He goes back to the lighthouse. And when he gets to the lighthouse, Henry's there. And they end up having a confrontation. And I forgot exactly what their conversation is. But there's this point where they're grappling with each other, and they're at the top of the lighthouse. And at one point, Henry is leading him to the ledge of the lighthouse. And Henry keeps going, stop pulling me, stop it, stop doing this. And he goes, you're pushing me. And in this moment, they're both being controlled, because what you get is that Henry has also been, whatever has affected Saul, Henry has also been affected by. And they end up both plummeting off the side of the lighthouse and hitting the ground. And when he comes to, he is alive and he feels pretty good, but he feels something inside him. Something is trying to get out of him. And there is a moment where he goes, I can't stop it, but I can make sure it doesn't come out here at my lighthouse in this place. And so he gets in his car and he just starts driving as far away as he can get. And, eventually he gets to a point where he can't take his car anymore. So he gets out and he literally just starts walking and walking and walking. And then there's the point where he like just can't anymore. It's gonna like come out, and he like fights really hard, and then he just starts saying the sermon, and the brightness comes out of him, and that is what creates the topographical anomaly, that tower that goes into the ground, and what brings down Area X. And you don't ever find out if Charlie made it out, but I like to think he did. And in his last moment,
I know, I did too.
Yeah,
I did too.
Saul is like, I hope you're gone. I hope you're far from here, buddy. And he's glad that Gloria's gone as well. While that is being told, because the scene, like what I just told you is cut into 3 different scenes, and it is getting interspersed with Ghostbird, Grace, and Control getting to the topographical anomaly, deciding that Grace and Control were gonna Ghostbird and Control were gonna go down into the tower, and Grace was gonna stand outside. They end up going in, and Ghostbird has like an interaction with the crawler where like examining her and everything, and it's super painful. And then when that like stops, and at the end of it, she's like, okay, I am entirely me. Like it has analyzed me, and she has this moment of feeling like she is herself. And she looks, and as she's having this moment, Grace shoots her. But she's fine, and then her and Grace have to go, but she realizes John isn't there. He went ahead, and what we see is John heading towards the light, because his whole thing is he has to do something. You can't just accept what is happening. It's more just like his entire life in the CIA is you do something. Like there is a plan, and you do the plan, you do the mission, whatever the case is. And his is figuring out, because the other thing I have to explain, when Ghostbird touches the crawler and it touches her, she sees the origin of Area X, which is a long time ago, a bunch of asteroids or comets destroyed a thing. And the thing splintered into thousands of little pieces that ended up coursing through space. And one shard ended up in a glass lens for a lighthouse and laid there dormant for years until somebody poked into that lighthouse and woke it up. And when it awoke, it started enacting its purpose, its goal, only to find that the people, the civilization, the force that sent it on its way, that imbued it with purpose, no longer exists. That it is recreating something, redoing something for a civilization or an organism that does not exist anymore. But that's its function, and it's gonna do its function, god damn it. And so it was in the lighthouse lens. When Henry did the pokey pokey, it let out whatever this is, and that's why that plant was right by the lighthouse. And so it does give the Area X a like almost like an AI that has lost its way. Like it no longer has anyone it's serving, but it's just doing the thing it's supposed to do.
Like cancer.
Yeah, but it also makes it kind of like sad. Like it's this functionless thing that like is still functioning. John is going down. He finds the light at the end of the tower that Ghostbird sees, and as he's running toward it, he feels the change happening, and he feels his body shifting, and he realizes at a certain point he's no longer fully human, and he kind of commits, and he ends up jumping through the light and jumping through the tunnel. And like the description is his paws under the, like he felt his paws on the feet, and like John Rodriguez elongated and then jumped through the light. Ghostbird and Grace end up coming out, and as they come out, they realize that something is different. John has done something, and something feels different in Area X. So they start walking towards the border to see if whatever John did, because he's gone, did anything. We get a scene that flashes to the director as she's dying, which I'm going to finish up in a moment. But they're walking towards the border. They get to where the border was, and there's nothing there. They keep walking, and they end up getting to the Southern Reach building, and they're like, is there a new border? Is there no border? What has happened? And there's this sense of joy, like not joy, but like almost hopefulness. As they're walking towards the Southern Reach, they see a marmot stick its head up and like looks at Ghostbird very pointedly, and then fucks off. And you're like, oh, hi, John. How you doing, marmot guy? But there's this sense of like something has changed. Like you cannot stop Area X. It is going to change everything. But the sense I got is that by choosing to jump in, and that point, that light is Saul's original starter point for Area X. For me, it functions like the DNA of Area X. And by jumping in and becoming part of it, John has changed how Area X will function within humanity and society, and made it vaguely, potentially, you never find out, more human friendly. But what you know is that there is an opening sense to it, because as they're walking, there is a sense of hope, and you never see them get past or get to a border, but that's how their plot ends, of them walking towards, and the sense of change. Something, again, we're fucked. change is going to happen. We're all going to turn into shit, but something has changed where it might not be as terrible or as absolutely horrifying as it was before. And then
maybe just John got like analyzed by the AI of it, and it was like, oh, human DNA, I get it now.
Here's what we're going to do with it, or here's how I'm going to integrate it into the system less
obtrusively.
Well, integrate it into the system versus corrupt it and turn it into the thing. Yeah, integrate versus just wallpaper over.
Yeah, obliviate. And the last scene is the letter that Gloria wrote to Saul, which is basically her saying, I'm sorry it took me so long to get back. I didn't forget you. I'm sorry you got left behind. And it closes with like her being like, Gloria, the girl who jumped on rocks and was a pain in the butt. And it's very sweet and heartfelt, and it made me cry. This time it did. Last time it didn't. I don't know why. I don't know if I was in the emotional point for it. But that is how it ends. You never find out what happens like with Area X, but again, there is a sense of hope, and that idea that you cannot stop change, but that you can potentially embrace it and like become part of it in a way that is not harmful and disruptive. And listen, it's beautifully written. You might not like this book series. It might not be for you. You might be a Will, which is absolutely valid.
Go read it.
Read it.
Go read it.
Just for the Whippy scene alone.
I will just say my final thoughts first. I think we should probably just go through final thoughts pretty quickly. I have talked a lot of shit about this series. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
This is probably one of the best book series we've read since we started this podcast. I have a feeling that much like Spinning Silver, I will like it more with time as I move away from the experience of reading it. I am very fond of it. It does so many things so well. That being said, I think that all the stuff we talked about at the beginning of this video and last video about like the expectations of it moving forward in plot are like not signaled well by the book. I think that the ending is kind of weak because, all the theme stuff Maria was just saying, I actually didn't really have that feeling from it, or that was that message. I don't know why John jumped in the hole. I don't really know why Saul and the director's viewpoints were included at all. I kept expecting one of them to come back and then neither of them did. And I kept expecting them to have some kind of like drop of knowledge that allowed John to do what he needed to at the end of the book, but then it didn't. Like again, there's that whole like thing we just talked about, Tom Bombadil. That was really my issue with the entire book. But yeah, it's really excellent. It's an extremely well written book.
It definitely, for me, as a trilogy, is probably my favorite trilogy.
I mean, I told Juan, my husband, that if it's not, it's close to being my favorite book of all time. Because of the prose, only like literally not even regarding the plot, just the prose.
Yeah, he's an incredibly talented writer. I wish he had written more stuff. It looks like he went off into writing some other weird series that was more like magical realism after this, or like just a little bit more niche. So we might take a look at that at some point. But Maria, of course, you have to say your opinion on this series.
Listen, again, the stuff with John and Ghostbird is very weak, and it weakens what that is trying to tell. And for me, it just hits all. It's almost like, while being not at all anything, because it is definitely got horror and elements. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm a scaredy cat. I don't do well with horror. Katie has made me watch so many scary movies, and like some of them I have really enjoyed, and some of them I was mad that I had to sit through. And then I like laid in bed for an hour being like, the thing in the tunnels isn't real. It's fine. That one with the under Paris in the underground. God,
I know.
I hate
as above, so below.
I'm so angry. I watched that movie. I randomly think about it. It makes me so angry.
She can't go to Paris now. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
I thought that you would like it because it was like Indiana Jones
No,
meets a horror
listen,
movie.
it is.
I actually didn't
it
find
is-
that movie that scary.
It's the thing. I don't know. There's something about the
No,
cramp.
I
like,
understand.
Spelunking's not for me, guys. There is something about this that hits a sweet spot for me, while simultaneously not being in any of my comfort zones or any of the tropes I naturally go to, outside of like old guy and young girl develop friendship, and like she's.
I wanted her
like,
to teach him how to dance because Charlie was never going to dance with him. So then Glory
I
could dance. That
know.
would have been so cute. But
I love that moment of her on the rocks where they're like, pose in the picture, and she's like, I'm gonna be on the rocks, and I'm a monster. Like,
yeah, that was great.
And so for me, this is, as far as a reading experience for myself, near perfect for myself. I understand, like, I think you could make very, like, obviously I respect Will as a person. Like, I think that some people are just, it's not going to be for them. Like I said, one of the only reviews I read for Annihilation was, guy got too obsessed with poetry, and like, negative review. Like, that was it. And so, like, you might like it might not be for you, but it is for me, while being simultaneously nothing that I only read this because I dated a dude who was like, yeah, I really like the Southern Reach trilogy, and I was like, I'll try that out.
She got rid of the boy but kept the trilogy.
I kept the trilogy.
There you go.
It literally, you see, I have a little box there with a little thing. It literally, the trilogy sits in a place of pride. They sit horizontal, one on top of each other, right there in the center. Like, right,
I think the covers
that
could
thing.
be a little bit better. I'm gonna be real.
I love
I thought
them.
it was funny.
I love the
love
Spanish ones.
It was interesting because, again, we were gonna do this as one video. We were gonna do the first book, and then we read the first book, and we were like, you know what, we really should do this as all three. And then we were going to do it as one video as all three, and that didn't work. And now there's 2 videos, and really, it should have just been 3 videos in terms of time.
Yes, correct.
But yeah, I think this was a good ride. So hopefully you enjoyed it. We have a Patreon. Go join that if you would like to give us money and support independent journalism. And also tell us in the comments what you thought of the book.
All right, bye, guys.